Welcome to the very first episode of our deep dive into one of the most disturbing true crime cases of recent years, the story of Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt, a saga of abuse, manipulation, and the creation of a cult-like dynamic within a family that captivated and horrified the nation. Today, we'll start by introducing the central figures, their backgrounds, and how their paths fatally intertwined. This is Ruby and Jodi, a cult of sin and influence.
I've heard bits and pieces about Ruby Franke online, but there's so much I don't know. Can you start by telling me who Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt were before the crimes? What were their lives like?
Ruby Franke, born January 18, 1980 in Utah, was a mother of 6 and the creator of the widely followed 8 Passengers YouTube channel. Her online persona was that of a devout Mormon and parenting expert, sharing strict child-rearing philosophies with millions. Jodi Hildebrandt, on the other hand, was born June 18, 1969 in Arizona, one of 7 children in a Mormon family. She became a licensed therapist and life coach, operating her counseling business, ConneXions, in Utah. Both women were deeply embedded in their religious communities, but beneath that surface, troubling patterns lurked.
So Ruby was a social media figure and Jodi was a therapist. How did their paths cross originally? Was it through Ruby's channel or something else?
Their connection began in 2019, when Ruby sought Jodi's professional guidance for family issues. At that time, Ruby's marriage to Kevin Franke was deteriorating, and Jodi's counseling sessions grew increasingly intense. By 2021, Jodi had moved into the Franke household, citing shadow figures tormenting her, a claim Ruby supported. This led to Ruby initiating an in-home separation from Kevin, with Jodi essentially replacing him in Ruby's life. Their relationship quickly transformed from counselor-client to business partners and, alarmingly, spiritual confidants.
That sounds incredibly close, almost codependent. Did anyone in Ruby's family or community notice how intense things were getting between her and Jodi?
Absolutely. Kevin Franke, Ruby's husband, was reportedly alarmed by the changes. He wasn't allowed upstairs in his own home, and Ruby began sleeping in the same bed as Jodi. Kevin described their behavior as sharing spiritual visions, hinting at a deep psychological and possibly cult-like bond. Ruby's older children later testified that the atmosphere in the home grew dark and oppressive, with Jodi exerting significant control over Ruby's choices and parenting style.
That's chilling. So when did things start to escalate from weird family dynamics to outright criminal behavior?
The criminal acts began in May 2023, after Ruby and her 2 youngest children moved into Jodi's home in Ivins, Utah. During the next several months, the children endured severe physical and psychological abuse. Court documents later revealed they were denied food and water, forced to perform grueling outdoor labor in extreme heat, and subjected to bizarre punishments, like being forced to jump onto a cactus repeatedly. The children were told they were evil and needed to repent. 1, 2.
That's horrifying. What evidence did investigators find that proved the extent of this abuse? Were there witnesses or physical evidence?
The evidence was both physical and testimonial. On August 30th, 2023, Ruby's then 12-year-old son escaped through a window of Jodi's home, his wrists and ankles covered in wounds from handcuffs and rope. He went door to door seeking help. A neighbor finally opened the door, saw the boy's emaciated condition, and immediately called authorities. Doorbell footage later showed the moment, capturing the boy's desperate plea for help. Police arriving at the scene found Ruby's 9-year-old daughter locked in a closet, her head shaved, also showing signs of severe neglect. 1.
That neighbor's reaction must have been emotional. What did they say when they called the police, and how did authorities respond?
The neighbor, holding back tears, described the boy as hungry and thirsty, covered in wounds. He offered water, a banana, and a chair while waiting for the ambulance. He said, "This kid is in bad shape. I don't know what's happened, but he needs help." When officers arrived, they noted the boy's injuries: blistered, sloughing skin from sun exposure, damaged muscle and tissue from restraints, and signs of malnutrition. His sister was similarly malnourished and traumatized.
Once police had the children, what did the initial investigation reveal about the conditions inside Jodi's home? Was there more evidence found beyond the children's injuries?
Police conducted an emergency search of Hildebrandt's home that day, meticulously documenting every detail. They found the closet where Ruby's daughter was being kept, a small, windowless space with only a thin blanket. There were handcuffs, ropes, and duct tape in plain view. Forensic analysis indicated prolonged restraint and confinement. Investigators also recovered journals, digital devices, and handwritten notes, including one chilling entry: "Repentance is suffering. Only suffering cleanses evil."
That's so disturbing. Did anyone else come forward with accounts of abuse or strange behavior related to Ruby and Jodi?
Yes, multiple witnesses spoke up during the investigation. Jodi's own niece, Jodi Hildebrandt, recounted her experience of abuse as a teenager, being forced to sleep outside in winter with only a sleeping bag, her mouth duct taped shut. Jessie's parents corroborated these claims, and a 2010 police report confirmed the allegations, though no charges were filed at that time. 1. Other neighbors described hearing children crying and seeing them laboring outside for hours, sometimes barefoot and clearly distressed.
What about Ruby's older children? Did they testify or provide information about what was happening behind closed doors?
Ruby's older children, particularly Sherry Franke, played a crucial role. Sherry was the first to post online after her mother's arrest, saying, "Finally." In interviews, she described years of escalating control and isolation, noting how Jodi's presence made everything worse. Sherry detailed the strict rules, food restrictions, and emotional manipulation. She also mentioned attempts to alert authorities long before the escape, but social services reportedly failed to intervene. 1.
That's chilling. So when did things start to escalate from weird family dynamics to outright criminal behavior?
The criminal acts began in May 2023, after Ruby and her 2 youngest children moved into Jodi's home in Ivins, Utah. During the next several months, the children endured severe physical and psychological abuse. Court documents later revealed they were denied food and water, forced to perform grueling outdoor labor in extreme heat, and subjected to bizarre punishments, like being forced to jump onto a cactus repeatedly. The children were told they were evil and needed to repent. 1, 2.
That's horrifying. What evidence did investigators find that proved the extent of this abuse? Were there witnesses or physical evidence?
The evidence was both physical and testimonial. On August 30th, 2023, Ruby's then 12-year-old son escaped through a window of Jodi's home, his wrists and ankles covered in wounds from handcuffs and rope. He went door to door seeking help. A neighbor finally opened the door, saw the boy's emaciated condition, and immediately called authorities. Doorbell footage later showed the moment, capturing the boy's desperate plea for help. Police arriving at the scene found Ruby's 9-year-old daughter locked in a closet, her head shaved, also showing signs of severe neglect. 1.
That neighbor's reaction must have been emotional. What did they say when they called the police, and how did authorities respond?
The neighbor, holding back tears, described the boy as hungry and thirsty, covered in wounds. He offered water, a banana, and a chair while waiting for the ambulance. He said, "This kid is in bad shape. I don't know what's happened, but he needs help." When officers arrived, they noted the boy's injuries: blistered, sloughing skin from sun exposure, damaged muscle and tissue from restraints, and signs of malnutrition. His sister was similarly malnourished and traumatized.
Once police had the children, what did the initial investigation reveal about the conditions inside Jodi's home? Was there more evidence found beyond the children's injuries?
Police conducted an emergency search of Hildebrandt's home that day, meticulously documenting every detail. They found the closet where Ruby's daughter was being kept, a small, windowless space with only a thin blanket. There were handcuffs, ropes, and duct tape in plain view. Forensic analysis indicated prolonged restraint and confinement. Investigators also recovered journals, digital devices, and handwritten notes, including one chilling entry: "Repentance is suffering. Only suffering cleanses evil."
That's so disturbing. Did anyone else come forward with accounts of abuse or strange behavior related to Ruby and Jodi?
Yes, multiple witnesses spoke up during the investigation. Jodi's own niece, Jodi Hildebrandt, recounted her experience of abuse as a teenager, being forced to sleep outside in winter with only a sleeping bag, her mouth duct taped shut. Jessie's parents corroborated these claims, and a 2010 police report confirmed the allegations, though no charges were filed at that time. 1. Other neighbors described hearing children crying and seeing them laboring outside for hours, sometimes barefoot and clearly distressed.
What about Ruby's older children? Did they testify or provide information about what was happening behind closed doors?
Ruby's older children, particularly Sherry Franke, played a crucial role. Sherry was the first to post online after her mother's arrest, saying, "Finally." In interviews, she described years of escalating control and isolation, noting how Jodi's presence made everything worse. Sherry detailed the strict rules, food restrictions, and emotional manipulation. She also mentioned attempts to alert authorities long before the escape, but social services reportedly failed to intervene. 1.
That's chilling. So when did things start to escalate from weird family dynamics to outright criminal behavior?
The criminal acts began in May 2023, after Ruby and her 2 youngest children moved into Jodi's home in Ivins, Utah. During the next several months, the children endured severe physical and psychological abuse. Court documents later revealed they were denied food and water, forced to perform grueling outdoor labor in extreme heat, and subjected to bizarre punishments, like being forced to jump onto a cactus repeatedly. The children were told.
Did the kids ever try to signal for help in any of those videos or online in any way?
Astute viewers later pointed out moments where the boy's eyes darted nervously off camera, or he wore long sleeves even in summer. In one video, he quietly tapped his fingers in a pattern, interpreted by some as Morse code spelling help. While never confirmed, it's clear that the children were trying, in small ways, to reach out.
That's heartbreaking. Were there any psychological evaluations of Ruby and Jodi themselves? What did experts conclude about their mindset or motivations?
Forensic psychologists evaluated both women after their arrest. Ruby was diagnosed with narcissistic and obsessive-compulsive traits marked by a rigid belief in her own righteousness. Jodi, meanwhile, was described as having delusional disorder, grandiose type, convinced she was on a mission to purify the children. Both exhibited classic features of coercive cult leaders: charisma, control, and a justification for cruelty.
Did investigators look into Jodi's past for similar patterns of behavior? Was this her first abuse allegation?
This was not Jodi's first brush with law enforcement. In fact, a 2010 police report detailed allegations from her niece, Jodi Hildebrandt, who claimed Jodi forced them to sleep outside in winter and duct-taped their mouths shut. The case was closed without charges, but it established a chilling pattern of psychological and physical abuse stretching back years.
How did Ruby's husband, Kevin, factor into all of this? Was he aware of the abuse, or how did he explain his absence?
Kevin Franke told police he had been shut out of the family by Ruby and Jodi, forced into a downstairs bedroom and forbidden from interacting with the children. He described feeling powerless and manipulated, but experts remain divided. Some believe he was also a victim of coercive control, while others argue he failed to protect his children.
Did any other family members or friends try to intervene on the kids' behalf?
Ruby's sister, Bonnie, became increasingly concerned in early 2023. She texted Ruby repeatedly, asking to see the children and offering to help. Ruby cut off contact, accusing Bonnie of being part of the evil. Friends who questioned Ruby's methods were blocked or shunned. The isolation was total and intentional, a classic tactic in abusive, cult-like dynamics.
As the timeline neared the escape, did the intensity of the abuse increase? Was there a specific incident that pushed the boy to risk everything?
Yes, the pattern grew more severe by late August 2023. According to his testimony, the boy was denied food for 3 days after being caught sneaking water. On August 29th, he overheard Jodi telling Ruby they would have to start over if he broke again. Fearing for his life, he waited until Jodi left and made his final escape through a window, injured but determined.
When he finally escaped and reached the neighbor, how did that moment unfold? What were the immediate reactions?
The neighbor, David Murdoch, opened the door to find a gaunt, trembling boy with open wounds. Doorbell footage later released to the public showed David's shock. He immediately offered the boy water and a banana. On the 911 call, David's voice shakes as he says he's starving, he's hurt bad. Paramedics arrived within minutes and described the boy as dangerously malnourished, in acute distress.
What happened to his sister at that moment? Was she rescued right away?
The boy insisted police go immediately to Jodi's house, telling them, "My sister is still there." Officers arrived to find the 9-year-old girl in a locked closet, her head shaved with visible bruises. She was taken by ambulance to the hospital, where doctors found she was dehydrated and suffering from untreated wounds. Their rescue was swift, but the damage was immense.
After their rescue, what steps did law enforcement and child services take to ensure the children's safety and begin their recovery?
The children were immediately placed in state protective custody and underwent round-the-clock medical and psychological care. Social workers coordinated with trauma specialists, and a multidisciplinary team began compiling evidence from both homes, seizing logs, digital devices, and physical restraints. Investigations expanded to review years of records, online content, and witness statements.
Were there any complications or challenges in gathering all the evidence, especially given how careful Ruby and Jodi were to hide things?
Absolutely. Investigators faced encrypted files, deleted messages, and staged rooms. Forensic IT specialists spent weeks recovering data, piecing together timelines from phone logs, deleted videos, and cloud backups. Physical evidence, ropes, handcuffs, logs, had been wiped down with bleach, but trace evidence and DNA analysis still linked them to the victims.
Did the children ever testify about their experiences, or was their account presented through interviews and experts?
Both children participated in carefully monitored interviews with forensic child specialists, their statements recorded for court. The boy's testimony was especially powerful. He described in detail the punishments, the deprivation, and his hope for freedom. Portions of his account were played in court, prompting tears from jurors and observers alike.
How did the community respond as more details came out? Was there shock, anger, or any organized support for the children?
The reaction was one of collective shock and grief. Vigils were held outside the Franke home, and donations poured in for the children's recovery. Local organizations launched campaigns to raise awareness about child abuse warning signs, and police fielded dozens of new reports from community members re-examining past interactions with Ruby and Jodi.
Did any experts comment on how this case compared to other high-profile abuse cases in terms of severity or complexity?
FBI behavioral analyst Robin Drike called it one of the most intricate and chilling cases of coercive control and familial abuse he'd ever seen. Experts cited the combination of social media deception, religious extremism, and psychological manipulation as unique factors that allowed the abuse to go undetected for so long.
What's the current status of the children now? Are there any updates on their recovery or where they are living?
Due to privacy laws, specifics are limited, but recent reports indicate both children are in foster care with access to ongoing therapy and medical support. Their progress is slow but steady. Counselors say they're beginning to trust adults again, and both are back in school, engaging with peers, and showing resilience that has inspired many.
Hearing all these details, it's hard to believe this nightmare happened in plain sight. Is there any indication that changes are being made to prevent cases like this in the future?
The case has prompted legislative reviews in Utah and beyond, focusing on homeschooling oversight and mandatory reporter protections. Lawmakers are considering reforms to ensure no child falls through the cracks of the system again. It's a small measure of hope after so much tragedy, a community determined to learn from the suffering of these brave survivors.
August 30th, 2023, Ivins, Utah, 9:43 p.m. That's when the Washington County Dispatch receives a chilling 911 call from a neighbor, Arthur Manning. He's frantic, describing a 12-year-old boy, later confirmed as Ruby Franke's son, who's appeared at his door, gaunt, with duct tape on his ankles and wrists, begging for food and water. Manning's voice shakes as he says, "This child looks starved, like he hasn't eaten in weeks."
That's horrifying. How did Manning react in the moment? Did he know who the boy was? And what did he say to the dispatcher to get help so quickly?
Manning tells dispatch, he says his name is Ethan. He's scared, he's whispering, says he escaped from that house over there. Manning immediately offers Ethan a glass of water and a granola bar, but the boy winces in pain. His lips are cracked, wrists raw from the tape. Manning doesn't recognize Ethan, but senses the urgency. He stresses he's hurt and he's terrified to go back.
Do we know what Ethan told Manning about how he escaped or what was happening inside that house? What details stood out most in that first encounter?
Ethan whispers, "Please, don't let her find me. She locked me in the room for days. I haven't eaten." He says he used a small metal bracket he found under the bed to pry off the window screen, crawling out barefoot, then ran across the backyard. He describes Jodi Hildebrandt's house as cold, dark, with locks on every door.
How quickly did first responders arrive, and what was their initial reaction when they saw Ethan? Did they immediately suspect abuse?
Officers Jason Crowell and Brandy Fuller arrive within 6 minutes. They're stunned by Ethan's appearance: sunken cheeks, visible ribs, bruises on his arms, wrists swollen from tape. EMTs rush to examine him, documenting a body temperature of 95 degrees and a weight 20 pounds below average for his age. Crowell later says, "In 15 years, I've never seen a child this malnourished outside of a hospital."
Did Ethan say anything to the officers or EMTs but gave more insight into what was happening in the house? Was he able to communicate clearly?
Ethan is exhausted, but he manages to whisper, "My sister is still there. Please help her." He gives officers the name Eve, describing her as younger, locked in the other room. He says, "We weren't allowed to talk or eat unless we confessed our sins." EMTs note he's dehydrated and suffering from muscle weakness, likely from prolonged starvation.
What was the immediate response from police? Did they go straight to Hildebrandt's house? Did they know Ruby Franke was involved at this point?
Officers coordinate with backup and approach 2113 West Sand Hollow Road, Jodi Hildebrandt's property. They knock, announcing themselves. Jodi answers, trying to block the door. Police notice a young girl peering from behind. Upon entry, they find Eve, 9 years old, frail, with open sores on her arms. Ruby Franke is inside, her demeanor calm but defensive.
Did Jodi or Ruby try to explain what was going on, or did they resist the police at all? What did the officers see inside the house?
Jodi insists, "We're conducting a therapeutic intervention. The children are being disciplined for their own good." Officers are struck by the stark, almost clinical interior. Bare mattresses, no food in the kitchen, windows screwed shut.
The discovery of over 50 discipline logs and hundreds of hours of surveillance footage shocks investigators. Detective Crowell remarks, "This wasn't just a household. This was a closed system, a cult built around obedience and confession. The sheer scale of documentation points to a calculated, long-term operation." 1-3.
Did the children show any signs of hope or resilience, even in those first days after being rescued? How did medical and psychological teams support their recovery?
Despite trauma, Ethan asks for books and quietly draws pictures of animals. Eve, after days of silence, finally smiles when given a stuffed bear. Therapy focuses on building trust, teaching self-care, and helping them reclaim autonomy. Dr. Greer states, "Their resilience is remarkable. They're survivors in every sense."
Did investigators reconstruct a detailed day-to-day timeline of the children's lives inside Jodi's house? What did this reveal about their daily routines?
Digital logs and interviews reveal rigid schedules. Wake at 5 a.m., write confessions, isolated meals, hours of silence, and evening reflection sessions. Any deviation, speaking out of turn, forgetting a chore, resulted in correction. The routine is obsessive, leaving no space for play, learning, or affection. It's systematic deprivation.
Were there any physical clues in the house that spoke to the children's experience? Marks, hidden notes, or other signs of distress?
Forensics find scratch marks on window frames, a note under Ethan's mattress reading "Help us," and drawings etched into the wall, stick figures behind bars. In the bathroom, blood-stained tissue and makeshift bandages suggest untreated injuries. Every room tells a story of endurance and silent pleas for rescue.
Did the investigation reveal anything about how Ruby and Jodi justify their actions to themselves and others? What language or reasoning did they use?
Their journals and digital messages are filled with phrases like purification, breaking pride, and restoring order. They frame suffering as necessary for growth, invoking a perverse sense of duty. Friends recall Ruby saying, "A loving parent must be willing to hurt their child in the name of salvation." It's chillingly rationalized.
Were there any patterns in how discipline escalated? Did certain triggers or events lead to more severe punishments?
The timeline shows punishments intensify after perceived acts of disobedience, like Ethan resisting confession or Eve crying at night. Each escalation is meticulously logged: duration of isolation, type of food withheld, number of confessions required. The structure is methodical, almost bureaucratic in its cruelty.
Were there any former associates or friends of Ruby and Jodi express regrets or suspicion about not intervening sooner? Any notable testimonies?
Several friends express guilt. One says, "We noticed Ruby withdrawing, but she dismissed concerns, calling us jealous." A former counseling client recalls Jodi saying, "If you're not strong enough to discipline, you're enabling sin." Many now wish they'd pushed harder or reported sooner, haunted by what they missed.
Did investigators face any obstacles, legal, procedural, or otherwise, in gathering evidence or interviewing witnesses?
Defense attorneys initially challenged the seizure of digital evidence, claiming privilege due to Jodi's therapeutic status. Some witnesses are reluctant, fearing backlash from loyalists. But mounting evidence and the children's medical condition override most legal hurdles. The DA's office fast-tracks charges, citing imminent risk.
Did investigators face any obstacles, legal, procedural, or otherwise, in gathering evidence or interviewing witnesses?
Yes, defense attorneys initially challenged the seizure of digital evidence, claiming privilege due to Jodi's therapeutic status. Some witnesses are reluctant, fearing backlash from loyalists. But mounting evidence and the children's medical condition override most legal hurdles. The DA's office fast-tracks charges, citing imminent risk.
As the investigation unfolded, did any new witnesses or whistleblowers come forward with critical information about the inner workings of the cult?
Yes, Jodi Hildebrandt, Jodi's niece, steps forward. She describes years of emotional abuse and forced isolation by her aunt, corroborating the children's accounts. Jessie provides personal diaries, adding depth to the psychological portrait. Her testimony becomes a turning point, confirming a pattern of systemic control.
Did the authorities coordinate with any national agencies or child protection organizations as the case grew in scope?
The FBI's Child Exploitation Task Force is brought in to review digital evidence for possible interstate offenses. National child advocacy groups offer specialized counseling and assist in victim support. The case is flagged as a priority within the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children due to its severity and complexity.
As the initial investigation phase closed, what were the key findings that shaped the next stage of the case against Ruby and Jodi?
The evidence is overwhelming. 2 severely malnourished children, corroborating digital logs, surveillance footage, written confessions, and expert testimony. Prosecutors prepare charges of aggravated child abuse, neglect, and criminal conspiracy. Investigators warn, this is just the beginning. More victims may come forward as the truth unfolds. The investigation into Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt's crimes truly began in earnest on August 30, 2023, at 10:47 p.m. That's when officers responded to a 911 call from a neighbor in Ivins, Utah. He'd reported a malnourished, injured boy, Ruby's 12-year-old son, who had just escaped from Hildebrandt's home. Officers arrived within minutes and immediately documented the boy's condition. Deep lacerations on his wrists and ankles, severe sunburns, and visible emaciation.
That moment must have been shocking for the officers. How did they begin collecting evidence at the scene, and what were their immediate priorities?
The officers' first priority was to secure medical attention for the boy. He was rushed to St. George Regional Hospital. Meanwhile, law enforcement entered Hildebrandt's house under exigent circumstances. They methodically photographed the interior, focusing on the bedroom closet where they discovered Ruby's 9-year-old daughter, Eve, head shaved, severely underweight, and wearing soiled clothing. She was unable to speak when officers first found her.
Finding Eve like that must have raised so many questions. What specific evidence did the officers collect inside the house that night?
They documented the closet in detail, measuring its dimensions, photographing the bedding, and cataloging the food and water supplies that were absent. Investigators recovered 2 sets of handcuffs, one still attached to a bed frame, and another with blood residue. They also seized rolls of duct tape, rope, and partially used bottles of cayenne pepper and honey, which matched the boy's statement about his wounds being treated with those substances.
That's incredibly disturbing. How did they process and analyze the physical evidence, especially the handcuffs and rope?
Forensic technicians wore gloves and carefully bagged each item. At the State Crime Lab in Salt Lake City, the handcuffs and rope underwent fiber and blood analysis. They found traces of the boy's DNA on both, confirming he'd been restrained there. The duct tape had both Ruby's and Hildebrandt's fingerprints, as well as adhesive residue with skin cells, which yielded a DNA match to the boy.
That's chilling. What about forensic medical exams? What did doctors find when they examined the children?
At the hospital, pediatricians performed full-body examinations on both the boy and Eve. The boy weighed just 51 pounds, dangerously underweight for his age. He had infected wounds on his wrists and ankles, consistent with prolonged restraint. Eve had bruises along her arms and legs, patchy hair loss, and dehydration. The medical team collected swabs from their wounds for bacterial cultures and took high-resolution photos as part of the forensic record.
That's incredible. How did those medical findings influence the investigation? Did they help build the case against Ruby and Jodi?
Absolutely. The forensic evidence established a timeline of abuse. Doctors testified that the wounds were not accidental and were indicative of deliberate, repeated infliction. The severity of malnutrition and dehydration provided irrefutable proof of long-term neglect. These medical records became central to the prosecution's case, directly tying the physical injuries to both Ruby and Jodi's actions.
Did the investigators interview the children? What details emerged that matched the forensic evidence?
The boy described being forced to sleep on a bare tile floor, denied food for days, and having his hands duct-taped behind his back. He recalled being told, "You're evil and need to be fixed," a phrase Eve also mentioned. Both children independently described the use of cayenne pepper and honey on their wounds. Their stories match the physical evidence, from the closet's bedding to the location of the handcuffs.
Did outside witnesses or neighbors provide testimony that supported the children's accounts?
Yes, several neighbors reported seeing the children working outside barefoot for hours in July's extreme heat. One neighbor recounted hearing screaming and pleading from Hildebrandt's house on multiple occasions. Another neighbor told police, "I saw the boy with blisters on his feet and arms, but he never spoke to anyone." These accounts corroborated the timeline of abuse and the children's isolation.
Were there any physical clues in the house that spoke to the children's experience? Marks, hidden notes, or other signs of distress?
Forensics find scratch marks on window frames, a note under Ethan's mattress reading "Help us," and drawings etched into the wall, stick figures behind bars. In the bathroom, blood-stained tissue and makeshift bandages suggest untreated injuries. Every room tells a story of endurance and silent pleas for rescue.
Did the investigation reveal anything about how Ruby and Jodi justify their actions to themselves and others? What language or reasoning did they use?
Their journals and digital messages are filled with phrases like purification, breaking pride, and restoring order. They frame suffering as necessary for growth, invoking a perverse sense of duty. Friends recall Ruby saying, "A loving parent must be willing to hurt their child in the name of salvation." It's chillingly rationalized.
Were there any patterns in how discipline escalated? Did certain triggers or events lead to more severe punishments?
The timeline shows punishments intensify after perceived acts. In court, Ruby tearfully stated, "I am sorry for what I have done. I was led astray." But forensic psychologists noted the apology seemed performative, lacking genuine insight or empathy. Jodi remained defiant, insisting her techniques were misunderstood and misrepresented by the media. Neither woman made direct contact with the children post-arrest. All communication was barred by protective orders. Victims and family members described Ruby's apology as too little, too late.
What if forensic experts concluded about the long-term impact on the children? Are they receiving specialized support?
The children have been placed in state custody and are receiving intensive therapy, both physical and psychological. Forensic pediatricians documented complex trauma, including post-traumatic stress, trust issues, and developmental delays. Child psychologists are working to rebuild self-esteem and social skills. Experts caution that recovery could take years, given the severity and duration of the abuse. The state has enacted strict monitoring to ensure safety and proper care moving forward.
Did the investigation uncover any significant pieces of physical evidence, like journals, photographs, or medical devices?
Yes, investigators recovered journals written by Ruby and the children, documenting daily routines, punishments, and emotional states. Photographs of injuries, food logs, and supply inventories were entered into evidence. Medical devices, such as scales and glucose meters, were analyzed for patterns of deprivation. Combined, these physical artifacts corroborated victim testimony and provided a timeline of escalating abuse.
Were there any forensic breakthroughs that were especially crucial in connecting Ruby and Jodi to the crimes?
The most critical forensic breakthrough was matching injuries documented in hospital records with handwritten punishment schedules found at Hildebrandt's home. DNA analysis confirmed the presence of Ruby's children in specific rooms. Digital timestamps on text messages aligned with video footage, establishing direct involvement. Experts also reconstructed deleted files, revealing a pattern of coordinated discipline between Ruby and Jodi.
Did investigators ever confront Ruby or Jodi with the evidence directly during interrogations? How did they react?
During interrogation, detectives presented Ruby with photographs of her children's injuries and transcripts of incriminating texts. Ruby broke down, initially denying intent, then blaming Hildebrandt's influence. Jodi remained stoic, refusing to answer most questions and invoking her right to counsel. Both suspects' reactions were documented and analyzed for signs of deception, guilt, or coercion.
Were there any lingering doubts or alternative theories considered by defense attorneys during the trial?
Defense attorneys floated alternative theories, suggesting Ruby was a misguided parent who was manipulated by Hildebrandt, while Jodi's team argued her coaching was misapplied by Ruby. Some attempted to introduce evidence of mental illness, though forensic psychiatrists disputed claims of diminished capacity. Ultimately, the weight of evidence left little room for reasonable doubt. The jury found both women guilty on all counts.
How has the wider community responded since the convictions? Is there ongoing debate about blame, responsibility, or systemic failures?
The Utah community has engaged in heated debate over parental rights, religious influence, and the dangers of unregulated coaching. Some blame Ruby's celebrity status for enabling the abuse, while others fault ConneXions' cult-like practices. Advocacy groups have called for stricter laws governing life coaching, and the media continues to scrutinize similar organizations. The case remains a cautionary tale about unchecked authority and the power of manipulation.
Given all the details, what do you think is the most important lesson or warning from this case about influence and control?
The Ruby and Jodi case underscores how charismatic leaders and persuasive ideologies can override common sense, empathy, and legal boundaries. It demonstrates the necessity of vigilance by family, friends, and community in recognizing warning signs of psychological abuse. Above all, it warns against blind trust in authority and the dangers of isolating vulnerable individuals from outside support. After the events of August 30, 2023, when Ruby Franke's 12-year-old son, Russell, escaped from Jodi Hildebrandt's home in Ivins, Utah, the investigation entered a new, intense phase. That night, Russell, malnourished and bruised, rang the doorbell of neighbor Cheryl Taylor at exactly 10:42 p.m., begging for food and water, his wrists marked by rope burns. This desperate act became the catalyst for the major breakthroughs that followed.
That moment must have been so intense. What was the immediate reaction from police when they arrived at Hildebrandt's house? Did they suspect the full extent of abuse right away?
When officers arrived minutes later, they found Russell's 10-year-old sister, Eve, locked inside a windowless pantry closet. She was so weak she could barely stand. The officers documented her injuries, lacerations, bruises, and visible signs of prolonged starvation. Law enforcement described the scene as concentration camp-like. Their immediate reaction was shock and urgency, prompting them to call in forensics teams and child protective services.
What did the forensics teams uncover during the initial search? Were there any particularly damning pieces of evidence found in the house?
Forensics cataloged a chilling array of items: rope, handcuffs, and an open jar of cayenne pepper paste, which investigators later learned was used to treat the children's wounds. Blood stains and traces of duct tape were found in the closet. Investigators also recovered a detailed notebook written in Hildebrandt's handwriting, outlining daily repentance tasks and punishments for the children. This notebook would become crucial to the prosecution's case.
That notebook sounds like a goldmine for the investigation. What kind of details did it include? Were there any specific entries that stood out to investigators?
Absolutely. The entries were exhaustive, with dates, times, and descriptions of forced labor and punishments. For example, on July 17, 2023, Hildebrandt wrote, "Eve to remain in closet until she confesses to lying about hunger." Russell, 10 laps around yard, no water until completed. The notebook also included chilling affirmations like, "They must be cleansed of evil through suffering." Prosecutors highlighted these as evidence of premeditation and psychological manipulation.
That's horrifying. Did the investigators find any digital evidence, texts, emails, or recordings that further implicated Ruby and Jodi?
Yes, digital forensics played a huge role. Police seized both women's phones and computers. On Ruby's phone, they found texts to Jodi saying, "Russell needs another lesson tonight. He's still rebellious." There were also audio recordings of the women discussing purification rituals. One recording, dated August 15, 2023, had Ruby saying, "If we don't break their will now, they'll be lost forever." This reinforced the prosecution's narrative of coordinated, deliberate abuse.
Were there any witnesses or other people who came forward after the arrests? Maybe former clients or family members with insights into Jodi's or Ruby's behavior?
The arrests led to an outpouring of testimony. Several former clients of Jodi's ConneXions program stepped forward, describing similar patterns of psychological control. Most notably, Jodi's niece, Jodi Hildebrandt, gave an exclusive interview. Jodi recounted being forced to sleep outside in winter with only a sleeping bag and having their mouth duct taped as a teenager. These accounts painted a broader picture of Jodi's long-standing abusive tendencies.
That's so revealing. Did the police or prosecution use Jessi's testimony in their case? And were there any other family members who spoke out?
Jodi's testimony wasn't used in court for the Franke case due to timing, but it was leveraged in the public narrative and the docuseries to establish a pattern. Several of Ruby's siblings also spoke out, expressing regret for not seeing the signs sooner. Ruby's estranged husband, Kevin Franke, provided investigators with emails and journal entries documenting Ruby's growing obsession with spiritual purification after meeting Jodi.
How did the investigation evolve after the children were removed from the house? What were the next major investigative steps?
After Russell and Eve were hospitalized for severe malnutrition and injuries, investigators expanded their timeline. They traced the pattern of abuse back at least 18 months to early 2022, when Ruby and her two youngest children moved into Hildebrandt's home in Ivans. The police interviewed neighbors, teachers, and church members, uncovering multiple reports of the children being absent from school, appearing gaunt, and being seen doing strenuous outdoor chores for hours in extreme heat.
2-3.
Were there any particular witness accounts that stood out or changed the direction of the investigation? Absolutely. One of the most pivotal accounts came from a neighbor, Linda Ramirez, who reported seeing Russell digging holes in the backyard in July 2023, sweating profusely with no water in sight. She recounted, "He looked so desperate, but when I offered him a drink, Jodi intervened and said it was part of his lesson." This first-hand account, corroborated by security camera footage, directly contradicted Jodi's insistence that the children were never mistreated.
Did the investigation uncover any indication that others might have been involved or aware of the abuse?
Investigators scrutinized the role of the ConneXions program and interviewed several staff members. Most denied knowledge, but one former assistant, Mark Elder, testified that he overheard Jodi instructing Ruby to starve out the demons from the children. While no charges were filed against staff, this testimony reinforced the cult-like atmosphere and Jodi's influence over Ruby's parenting.
Were there any major twists or surprises during the investigation? Maybe things that contradicted initial theories or changed the case's direction?
One major twist came when digital forensics revealed that Hildebrandt had installed hidden cameras throughout her home, ostensibly for security. Investigators recovered hours of